Hello dear listener, please subscribe to our channel. Enjoy watching. I was walking down the street on a weekend, just taking a leisurely stroll with the intention of visiting a cafe. On my way, a gypsy woman accosted me. It was as if she had been lurking, and she appeared in front of me when I was lost in my thoughts. After she offered to tell my fortune, I initially tried to silently walk past her to avoid engaging in any conversation. However, she wouldn't leave me alone and circled around me like a bee around a flower. After one of her persistent requests, I paused, looked at her, her tattered shawl layered over a long, dirty skirt, and decided to give her a few bucks from my pocket just to get her off my back. Here, take this, get yourself something to eat. Just leave me alone already. Oh, thank you, kind sir. She grabbed the bill as if it were a rare treasure. Wait, hold on, let me tell you your fate. Big changes are coming in your life soon, and the past will intertwine with the future. The unknown will reveal itself to you. Challenges will come your way, but you'll overcome them. You just need to make the right choice. She trailed off as I continued to walk away, not stopping to listen to her predictions, which I never believed in. I continued on my way, leaving the fortune teller behind and trying to forget her words. They meant nothing to me. I was living a peaceful life. The difficulties and changes that might happen had already occurred in my past. I've been married for several years. I met Elizabeth when we accidentally bumped into each other in a corridor. She was a journalist rushing to a conference to gather material for her upcoming article, and I was a simple courier, delivering a stack of papers to the recipient. After a brief introduction, we went our separate ways, but we crossed paths again near the coffee machine and struck up a conversation. She, like me at that time, was lonely and a spark ignited between us. 6 months later, we got married and enjoyed each other's company to the fullest means. However, there were times when we had to be apart briefly, when she was sent to other cities or countries for her work. By that time, she had become a well-known journalist and was entrusted with some of the most challenging assignments, which she carried out with ease and enthusiasm using her talent. We spent over 4 years together. We didn't rush into having children, and that might have been for the best. One day, a tragic event occurred. She simply disappeared. 7 years had passed since then. And first, I spared no effort to find her, contacting all possible authorities and distributing announcements everywhere. But it was all in vain. After a while, the police gave up their search, but I refused to give up. My friend also provided me with moral support during this time. Sometimes after work, I would visit my adoptive mother, who had taken me in as a baby but raised and loved me as her own. She was saddened to see me so gloomy and tried to distract me in various ways. Sometimes she sympathized, and sometimes she suggested I forget Elizabeth and find a new partner. But I couldn't. I loved her so deeply that I couldn't let go of it all. There was still a glimmer of hope inside me that one day I would meet her again and she would tell me some silly story about why she had been gone for so long. But on the other hand, I also knew my mother was right, and I should listen to her. At a time when I had nearly given up and decided to move on with my life, 2 men in suits showed up at my workplace, flashing badges, and claimed that I was involved in a major crime related to hacking a government website. But this is some kind of mistake. I told them, I'm not even that good with computers. What do you think it's me? Your face was captured by one of the cameras in Boston when you walked out of an internet cafe 2 weeks ago. That's when the crime was committed. But I've never been to Boston. The farthest I've traveled is out of town. This is some kind of mistake. You can't admit such things. But the agents from the special services were persistent. They handcuffed me and took me to the police station for a thorough interrogation. There they showed me a photo, and I was shocked to see my own face on it. How is this possible? I couldn't believe my eyes and couldn't explain how a camera in another city, far away from here, had photographed me. They allowed me to make a phone call, and I dialed my friend John's number, briefly explaining what had happened to me. I asked him to hire a lawyer. My friend wanted to come to me, but for some reason, he wasn't allowed. Only the lawyer and I could talk. He asked me where I had been 2 weeks ago and what I had been doing, but I couldn't recall it immediately. I had trouble remembering what I had done 2 days ago, let alone a week. Nevertheless, he promised to help and do everything possible to at least get me released while the investigation was ongoing. After he left, I was held in a cell for another day. John took the initiative and broke the sad news to my mother. She was deeply upset about what had happened to her son, and then she decided to call an old friend of hers in the police. It was a pleasant surprise for me, because she didn't always share information about her. East about her connections, but her friend promised to help and assist in the investigation. The next day, the lawyer and the police officer, who was my mother's acquaintance, came to me and informed me that I could be temporarily released because they had found evidence that on the day, and at the time when the crime was committed, I was in my hometown, New York, inspecting a house on 51st Street. Yes, in the past few months, I had started working as a real estate agent, and I enjoyed the job as it didn't require me to spend whole days in an office. My alibi was corroborated by the clients who had been with me at the time. Fortunately, I was able to regain my freedom, but the police officer warned me that I couldn't leave the city for some time. I was relieved to have my innocence practically proven, but the image I had seen in the photo still haunted me. Now, I wanted to find out who this person was, the one who looked exactly like me and had caused me to be mistaken for a criminal. I immediately went to my mother's house, and all the way there I mentally prepared for a serious conversation with her. "Oh, my son, I'm so glad they released you." I was so worried. "Kevin said he'd help," she said when I arrived. "Mom, sit down," I said, leading her to Tootle, and when we both sat down, I continued, hoping she could explain something to me. "Mom, they showed me a photo of a person who looked just like me. Verdict, you told me you adopted me. Tell me, Mom, could I have a twin brother? Oh, Hugo? I'd love to help you, but I can't know that. When I adopted you, you were so little. But they didn't tell me you might have a brother. We can try to find out, of course. But I'm not sure they will give us that information. This is a mess. I'm at a dead end. But there must be something," I said, feeling frustrated. "And what about your friend? Can he help? Maybe you could call him, and he's a policeman. Maybe he can come up with something to get us answers." "Oh no, my son, but we can try." My mother picked up the phone and called her friend. She talked to him for about 10 minutes, trying to persuade him that it was crucial. From her expression during the conversation, I could tell that this option was unlikely to yield any results. However, when she returned, she told me that Kevin had agreed. I decided to stay at my mother's for a while, just in case I needed another alibi to avoid any periods when I was alone. I even brought my cat with me. And at work, they made me take a few days off until things settled down because they were worried about the image of the campaign. A couple of days later, Kevin came to our house and delivered some news. Oh, I had to deal with such a grumpy old lady. I had to use my position to get her to share the information he told me. And what? Do we have any results? Did she say anything? Do I really have an identical twin brother? It seemed to be the only thing on my mind at the moment. Yes. She said that a very poor woman came to them back then, barely able to stand. The duty officer took her in, gave her something to eat, and then went to make a call to the relevant authorities. But when she returned, there were only 2 babies on the bench, and the woman was nowhere to be found. Unfortunately, she couldn't provide any more information about her. She did describe her, but it was so many years ago. The only thing she mentioned is that one of the babies was adopted almost immediately, but that family later moved to Philadelphia. About 6 months later, your mother visited their institution. So it's true. I'm really not at fault. I began to feel relieved. Yeah, I went to the police with that information. And they dropped all the charges against you. And they're looking for him now. They found out that his name is Joseph Root, and that he's actually been living in Boston for the last couple of years. But you still have to be careful. If this man, your brother, knows about you too, there's nothing to stop him from framing you, given his talent for computers. Thoughts and emotions swirled within me. All the recent news both comforted and worried me simultaneously. At some point, I even thought about how wonderful it would be to see this person who is my brother. But given the way he had been portrayed as a criminal, I reconsidered if it was worth it at all. Hugar, this isn't all the news. The police officer continued, and I turned back to him. What else? They asked. It seems we've made progress in tracking down your wife. We were searching for where Joseph might be, and we accidentally came across a woman who matches the description of Elizabeth. What? I interrupted. In where? In Buffalo. There's a woman who works as a nurse there, and she goes by the name Sophie Weather. I think you should go there and see for yourself. If it's really Elizabeth, you'll know it. The news almost made my legs tingle. I couldn't believe I was finally going to see her again. In Buffalo? But it's so far away. How would you even find her there? Well, it's a long story. We were tracking Joseph's movements, and despite his efforts to stay hidden, we can confirm he was in that city a week ago. You don't need to worry about that. Just go there and make sure it's her. And why couldn't your people determine this? Don't you have the capabilities? Why couldn't you approach her and ask? Or at the very least, arrest her, just like you did with me. You're quite good at that. Yes, I understand your concern, Xiugao. But at the moment, all our efforts are focused on capturing this criminal. Several new incidents of network intrusion have occurred, and we don't know what he might do next. He needs to be caught as soon as possible. Well, I've informed you, so I wish you luck. No, all my thoughts were focused on one thing, how to see Elizabeth as quickly as possible. I was convinced it was her. The police officer left me an address and departed. I eagerly awaited my mother's return to share the joyful news with her, while she was still out. I called John and asked him to come over, as I wanted to share my happiness with him. John arrived very quickly. He mentioned that my voice on the phone had sounded so distraught that he assumed something terrible had happened. But when I told him that I might soon find my wife, he was genuinely happy for me. So, what are you waiting for? I'd be racing there already if I were in your shoes. Listen, what will you ask her? Or more precisely, how do you think she'll explain her sudden disappearance? I don't know, my friend. And right now it doesn't matter. Priest, I need to get there. I've already checked. The next flight in that direction is in a few hours. I've time to get ready. Oh, it seems my mother has returned, I said as I heard the front door close. I shared the information with my mother, who was naturally delighted but still anxious. She assumed that if Elizabeth was alive, there must be a very serious reason for her disappearance. However, I was unwavering and fully prepared to embark on this journey to finally get answers to many of my questions and attempt to uncover the mystery connected to Elizabeth. The next morning, I was in Buffalo. My friend willingly accompanied me, or rather, insisted on coming along. He was curious about what was happening as well. We went directly to the hospital that the police officer had mentioned. Despite the early hour, we decided it was better to wait on site and see her when she approached the building. For about an hour, we sat in a rented car and John kept proposing various scenarios, but I was impatient, waiting to see Elizabeth and finally have a conversation with her. He gazed among the passing pedestrians. I spotted a woman who bore a striking resemblance to my wife. She had a different hairstyle and hair color, but her facial features were a perfect match, and even after all these 7 years, she hadn't changed much. I nudged my friend to stay in the car and got out, making my way toward the woman whom I believed to be Elizabeth. I walked carefully, not wanting to scare her away lest I lose her again. She entered the building, and I followed her. Putting on a lab coat, she headed into one of the rooms where an unconscious elderly man was connected to medical equipment. While she was busy with him, I quietly closed the door, pulled down the blinds, and approached her. Elizabeth, I said, and she turned around and looked at me in horror. This was the first part of a fascinating detective story. Continued in the next clip. And now we have another story. My wife cheated on me with a guy named Chad from her office. I found out when she left her Facebook Messenger logged in on the laptop, and I saw a message from Chad. Instead of reacting right away, I decided to keep my cool and think things through. I didn't want to end up regretting my actions later, like my brother did in a similar situation. He wished he had been more strategic and done something big to expose everything. I didn't want to feel that way, so I thought of a way to get back at both my wife and Chad. I want revenge that would really hit them hard. After a few days of planning, I realized the best way to do it would be to invite Chad's wife, Sarah, on a surprise double date. So, I messaged Sarah on Facebook and asked if we could talk over the phone. I thought she should know about her husband's infidelity, and maybe together we could put an end to their affair. But to my surprise, she agreed to meet with us. Sarah was surprisingly calm and collected about the whole thing. Instead of freaking out, she wanted revenge too, and she came up with a sneaky plan to make sure both of our cheating partners would get a taste of their own medicine. Sarah suggested we go on a date when we knew Jane and Chad would be sneaking around. We wanted them to catch us cheating on them, which would totally mess with their heads and be some epic revenge. At first, I hesitated, but the more I thought about it, the more I loved the idea. We chatted a lot for a few days, looking for signs of when they'd meet up. Finally, we found out they'd be at the Swanky bar on Friday night. Friday came, and Jane said she'd go out to eat with a friend and go shopping. I played along, my heart pounding, knowing my plan. Chad told Sarah he and the guys would go axe throwing, but we knew their real plan. That's it. Sarah and I decided to go on our date and accidentally bump into them there to see their shocked faces. We even agreed to dress up and look amazing. By the way, Sarah did look amazing. No doubt about it. When my wife left, I acted completely normal. When she was officially driving away, I sprang into action, getting ready for mine and Sarah's big night out. I picked up Sarah and we drove, chatting excitedly about how things would unfold. Both of us were pumped yet nervous. My emotions were a mix of sadness and frustration, but the rush of adrenaline kept us focused on our revenge plan. When we got to the bar, we spotted Jane and Chad cozying up in a corner, laughing and flirting. My heart pounded as we sat at a table just far enough not to be too obvious, but close enough for them to see us. We held hands, pretending everything was normal, and ordered drinks and an appetizer, sneaking glances at them until they finally noticed us. The look on their faces was priceless, pure shock, like they'd seen a ghost. I could almost see the gears turning in their heads, trying to figure out what was going on. Sarah blurted out, "They see us. You should kiss me." And first, I couldn't fathom doing that. But then I gave in, and we shared a passionate kiss, fueled by our shared anger. I peeked through my hands and saw them in a complete tizzy, emotions all over the place. They must have been feeling so angry, exposed, and utterly confused. It was like the list of emotions could go on forever. After about 15 minutes of us laughing and flirting, Chad finally gathered the courage to confront us. He stumbled over his words, trying to pass it off as a coincidence that we were all there together, demanding to know what was happening. I acted all nonchalant, greeting him like an old buddy. "Hey, Chad," I said as if we were just hanging out. "What a surprise to see you here." Sarah and I just felt like grabbing a drink for fun. "You remember Sarah, right? She's your wife." Chad's face turned beet red and he started stuttering even more. Jane, watching the whole thing from their table, looked horrified on the verge of tears. Before he could say anything else, Sarah jumped in. "Oh, come on. Well, Chad, we're not doing anything wrong. We're just two people enjoying ourselves, just like you and Jane." They were caught red-handed, and they knew it. Chad was at a loss for words, mumbled some excuse about needing the restroom, and disappeared in a hurry. As for Jane, she couldn't handle it anymore. She stood up, tears streaming down her face, and stormed out of the bar. It was clear that she never expected to be on the receiving end of her own game. With our sneaky plan successful, Sarah and I gave each other a high five and a knowing look, feeling incredibly satisfied for turning the tables on our cheating partners. We hung out at the bar a bit longer, finishing our drinks and getting to know each other better. Despite the crazy situation that brought us together, we found out we had a lot in common and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. As the night went on, we shared stories about our marriages, how we tried to make things work, and how we were both let down by our spouses. It was therapeutic to open up to someone who truly understood my pain. Eventually, it was time to call it a night. I dropped Sarah off at her place, and we promised to stay in touch. We knew tough conversations and decisions were coming our way, but at least we had each other for support. First, over the next few weeks, both of our marriages fell apart. Jane and Chad were full of remorse, but it was too little, too late. Sarah and I leaned on each other as we went through the process of filing for divorce and dealing with all the emotional fallout. In the end, our little revenge scheme did more than just teach our cheating partners a lesson. It brought two hurting souls together and gave us the strength to move on from our pasts. Third story. Okay, so let me tell you this crazy and surreal story that happened during my honeymoon. I and my wife, Emma, and I just got married, and we were at this beautiful beach resort for our honeymoon. The first day was fantastic. We were enjoying each other's company, the sun, the sand, all the good stuff. But things got weird on the second day. Emma suddenly said she had to go back to our room to use the bathroom and get more drinks. Little did I know, she was actually sneaking off to meet someone else. Yeah, she cheated on me during our honeymoon. Can you believe that? I was in shock. My heart was racing, and I had no idea what to do. So, I made a decision. I ghosted her. I just disappeared, taking all her stuff with me. I couldn't stand being around her after what she did. It was tough, and I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from that experience, but at least I know I made the right choice for myself. I can't believe I had to go through all of that, but hey, life throws some crazy stuff at you. And that's my story of dealing with a cheating spouse during what was supposed to be a dreamy honeymoon. Alright, here's what went down. It all started when my wife, Emma, vanished for nearly an hour. At first, I didn't think much of it, but when it happened again on the third day, I started to feel suspicious. So on the fourth day, when she said she needed to go back to the room, I decided to trail her. I told her I'd chill at the beach, but as soon as she was out of sight, I secretly followed her from a safe distance. When she reached the resort pool, I noticed this guy sitting there waving to her. He wasted no time getting up to join her. They exchanged smiles and waves before walking together. I kept following them until they both hopped into the elevator. Now, the stairs were right next to the elevator, and the resort only had 3 floors, so I dashed up to the 2nd floor and peeked out the door. And there it was. I saw Emma heading into a different room with this other guy. I had seen him hanging around the beach, this muscular dude with a suntan, checking her out, but I never thought she'd be into him. My heart sank. I mean, seriously? I'm a good-looking guy too, with a nice build and plenty of money. It was tough to believe what I was witnessing. The door closed behind them, and I just stood there in utter disbelief. What the heck did that guy have that I didn't? I was crushed, but I knew I had to act fast. I didn't want a big public scene, so fueled by anger, I went back to her room, packed up our stuff, and decided to ghost her completely. I took both room keys and left her with only her swimsuit, the one she wore when she went into his room, and her ID, which I left at the front desk. Yeah, I know it was a jerk move, but I wanted to make it tough for her to get back home. Plus, I needed a head start to grab my things before she figured out what happened and caught up with me. As I walked to the parking lot, my hands were shaking and I was a mess of emotions, but I was firm in my decision. I got into our car and started the 5.5-hour drive back home, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. A few days later, after I moved out of our place, Emma's mom called and I picked up. She went on to scold me for everything I did and to tell me how tough her daughter had it trying to get back home. Okay, here's how it all went down. Emma totally panicked when she realized I was gone. She tried desperately to get back into our room, but found herself locked out. She had no clothes, no cash, and no way to reach me. Yup. Well, I even took her cell phone after she failed to get through to me from the hotel lobby phone and begged the staff to let her in. Eventually, they caved, but she found the room empty. I'd taken everything. With no other option, she had to call her parents and spill the beans. They must have been livid, but they wired her some money so she could buy clothes and rent a car to go back home. I can only imagine how embarrassed she must have felt making that call, but you know what? I couldn't care less. In fact, I still don't care. It took hours for this whole mess to unfold. I only wish I could have seen the look on her face when she realized the consequences of her actions. And let me tell you, Emma's revelation didn't end there. So get this. Turns out, the rental car she got had a messed up gas gauge. It showed more fuel than it actually had. So she ended up running out of gas in the middle of nowhere, stuck on the side of the road. Still in shock from everything that went down, she had to call for roadside help and wait for an hour until they filled her tank. It must have been a real eye-opener for her, and part of me can't help but think she got what was coming to her. I mean, one moment she's on her honeymoon, having a blast on the beach, and the next she's stranded, hungry, and left behind. Yeah, she deserved that. Next anyway. I beat her to the apartment by a long shot. My buddy joined me to help, and I had all the time to pack my stuff and get out. I did it faster than ever. I didn't even bother leaving a note. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a face-to-face confrontation. She didn't deserve it. By the time she got back, I was long gone. My phone was blowing up with calls and texts from her, but I didn't bother responding. Her betrayal cut deep, and I couldn't bear to hear her voice or see her name on my screen. So, I took some drastic steps. First, I changed my phone number and deleted her contact from my phone. Then, I unfriended and blocked her on Messenger. I made sure there was no way for her to reach me directly. In the days that followed, I got messages from her friends and family on Facebook. Some scolded me for what I did, while others offered their support and sympathy. But I didn't bother responding to any of them. It was a roller coaster of emotions, but deep down, I knew I did the right thing. My trust in Emma was completely shattered, and there was no going back from that. After a few weeks, I finally got a long letter from Emma sent to my parents' house. She filled it with apologies and explanations for her actions. She tried to justify herself, saying it was a momentary lapse in judgment and that she still loved me. I could feel her pain in those words, but it didn't change the fact that she betrayed me in the worst way possible. I didn't bother responding to the letter, and I haven't spoken to her since. If you enjoyed this story, please like and leave a comment.